Despite the fact that the country had been on the winning side in World War I and it had not been restricted by treaty limitations, in the 1930s the Kingdom of Romania was not ready for a major conflict. Its army was large but under-equipped, lacking trucks, heavy artillery, and modern armored fighting vehicles. The first attempt at modernization took place in the mid-1930s, resulting in the creation of a small armored unit that was to become the core of a much larger force. However, expanding this unit proved to be extremely difficult given domestic and international circumstances. In early 1919, while the brief conflict against Hungary was going on, Romania already had 34 armored cars in a very poor state. To improve the army's capabilities, a tank combat school was formed, followed by the purchase of 76 Renault FT-17 light tanks from France, with which the 1st Battalion was formed. A lack of repair stations and mobile workshops guaranteed poor serviceability, and even though these tanks were still used even in the late 1930s, only 20 of them remained operational. Therefore, in 1935, a 10-year rearmament program kicked off, and Romanian delegations visited several friendly countries to see what could be obtained. Given the fact that Romania lacked the industry to build its own tanks, even Hungary was in a better shape in this regard, despite the severe limitations of the Treaty of Trianon, imports were the only available option. Romanian officers visited several manufacturers, such as Vickers, Renault, Ursus in Poland, and CKD plus Skoda in Czechoslovakia. In 1936, 35 AH-4 tankets were bought from CKD for the cavalry. Dubbed R1 in Romanian service, it went through several changes. It had thinner armor, a 50 horsepower engine, a heavy and a light machine gun, but it lacked the commander's cupola and a radio. Production under license was also agreed to, but this suffered delays and was eventually scrapped after the German occupation of Czechoslovakia. Only a single prototype was built. Still, this was the first step towards the creation of an armored force that would also need more firepower. For this reason, a contract was also signed with Skoda for the delivery of 126 LT-35 light tanks, which would later become the Panzerkampfwagen 35T in German service, similarly with some modifications. The latter would become the R2 tanks that then constituted the majority of Romanian armor. In fact, roughly 70% of all vehicles were of Czechoslovak origin. Deliveries started already in 1937, but some of them had to be sent back for a refit due to early reliability issues and for further modifications. Front armor was 25 mm, weight was 10.5 tons, and while the original 37 mm turret and the 118 horsepower Skoda engine were unchanged, the tanks came in two different versions, with the R2C having cemented armor and a different turret shape. Due to Czechoslovak mobilization and tensions with Hungary, the last shipment left the factory only in February 1939, but all vehicles were eventually delivered. With these tanks, 1st Armored Regiment could be formed to be stationed at Targoviste near Bucharest. 2nd Regiment, meanwhile, had the ancient Renault FT tanks, mainly for training purposes, before it could be expanded into a fighting unit with more modern types. In the meantime, to kickstart domestic production, the license to build 300 Renault UE supply carriers was signed with the country's other main supporter, France. It was unarmed, but could tow artillery guns and other items, such as the 47 mm Schneider 80 gun that Romania wanted for its divisional 12-gun anti-tank companies. From September 1939, the Malaxa factory in Bucharest assembled 126 tractors before French deliveries ceased. The Romanians could not manufacture the engine, the gearbox, or the instrument panel on their own, so only a handful more would be made, relying on stock captured by the Germans. In 1938 and 1939, new proposals were made, but only a single purchase could be completed. Originally, an offer was made to buy 200 Renault R-35 infantry tanks, but France lacked the necessary manufacturing capacity to build them, so only 41 were delivered in 1939, with which 2nd Armored Regiment could be expanded. Another 34 were added when Poland fell, and some Polish units escaped to Romania, so the regiment would have 75 of these tanks that in the end proved to be slow, somewhat undergunned, and seriously unreliable. Nonetheless, with these two regiments, 1st Armored Brigade could now be formed, but this unit still lacked modern tanks, proper logistics, and repair capabilities. Armored cars were also missing, with only 6 World War I models still serving in various cavalry units for reconnaissance. In early 1939, when Hungary occupied Ruthenia, no less than 12 Czechoslovak armored cars crossed the border into Romania, but the country could not keep them in service due to a lack of spare parts. A similar fate would fall on captured Soviet armored cars later on during the war. This may sound surprising, especially when we consider the fact that Hungary was able to put into production its own armored car, the 39M Csaba, equipping the army's reconnaissance units. The level of motorization was another hindering factor. Although Ford Romania, the country's only such factory, had assembled almost 3,000 trucks before the war for the army and the air force, the outbreak of hostilities practically ended all such efforts, to be replaced with repair and maintenance work only. Purchases from Czechoslovakia resulted in another 2,600 trucks and trailers for the motorized infantry, cavalry, and artillery. This was comparable to Hungarian numbers, but not enough to properly equip a much larger army that had to rely on horse-drawn vehicles instead. Before 1939, for obvious reasons, Romania had relied heavily on French support, but this came with a serious drawback. French doctrine became supreme in the military, and this doctrine emphasized the distribution of tanks among infantry units in order to support the advancing infantry, which was still seen as the decisive factor. Later on, this would have disastrous consequences, although already in October 1940, a German delegation arrived to offer a new way of thinking to Romanian tank crews and officers. Unfortunately for the Romanians, this did not have deep and lasting effects, as High Command stuck to traditional methods, and Germany remained reluctant to sell more tanks. After the fall of France, an attempt was made to buy the license to build 216 Skoda T-21 medium tanks that offered a front armor of 30 mm, a 47 mm gun, and a weight of 17 tons. However, the Germans refused to sell and would later accept a similar Hungarian offer instead, partly to play these two countries against each other. Hungary would then start the domestic production of the Turan tanks, while Romania still had to rely on foreign deliveries that were not forthcoming. The brigade was renamed the 1st Tank Division in April 1941, but it still lacked combat and support vehicles, along with cooperation between the different branches. 1st Regiment only had 109 operational R2 tanks, while 2nd Regiment's 74 R-35 light tanks were too slow and broke down all the time. When Operation Barbarossa commenced in June, Romanian 3rd and 4th Armies joined the invasion. The armored division fought Soviet T-28 tanks, taking Chisinau, but it was then bogged down at Odessa. 2nd Regiment lost half of its R-35 tanks even before reaching the city, while 1st Regiment only had 20 serviceable R2s. Individual units fought well, but poor communication and coordination resulted in unnecessary losses, with the tanks once again being spread across infantry units, having to lead costly frontal attacks. The city was given up by the Soviets in October, but 1st Armored Division had been wiped out in the process, with only a handful of tanks remaining. Since damaged vehicles could only be repaired in Romania, in October the unit was transported back home, along with the damaged R1 tankettes and armored cars that had been recovered by their cavalry formations. It would take until May 1942 for the repairs to be completed, just in time for the division to join Fall Blau, the new offensive, in which Romanian units would suffer unprecedented losses.